This conference will now be recorded.
All right, this conference is being recorded. So the first thing I need to tell you guys is that I've had COVID for a week. It's my first experience with COVID, and I've been very fortunate because I'm one of the purposefully under-vaccinated, and uh, it hit me. What was it? Yeah, about a week ago, and it's just been congestion in my throat, no fever, a lot of coughing because of the congestion. My lungs are clear, which is good, especially at my age, and just a lot of fatigue. But as long as you guys stay 18 inches away from your computer screen and you don't reach out and touch my picture, you're fine. Recording in progress. Okay. All right, there we go. Okay, so we're going to talk today about how to make parenting easier, less complicated, less arduous, however you want to put it, and hopefully to put a little humor back into the raising of children. One of the well, one of the things that people my age, I'm 75 years old. One of the things that people my age comment on to one another quite often is that no one concerned, parents today just don't seem to be having any fun. They may be pretending at times to have fun, but they don't seem to be really having fun. And that is certainly borne out by the comments that I obtain from parents and especially mothers today, and have been obtaining for quite some time, really since I started doing this parenting expert thing in the late 1970s. And that is women complaining that the raising of children is, quote, the hardest thing they've ever done, end quote, that keeps them up at night, sleepless nights, anxiety-ridden, highly stressful, frustrating, confusing because largely I think there's this cacophony of advice out there, especially now that we have the internet. And you've got 2,000 people out there writing parenting blogs. You know, I don't know that that number is correct, but and everybody writing a parenting blog is presenting themselves as some variation on an expert, and so you really don't know who to listen to anymore. I don't think, and these voices are often very conflicting, and they sometimes they don't make any sense, and that's certainly true from my perspective. When I read things on the internet, I would say that 100% of the time I'm reading stuff I don't agree with, and I'm reading stuff that could have been written 50 years ago. It doesn't seem like people who write on the subject of parenting get it. Well, get what, John? Well, they don't get it. That the child rearing paradigm that we embraced in the late 1960s and the early 1970s just simply isn't working, period. It's not like debatable. It's not working. It's not working for anyone. We started listening to mental health professionals, psychologists, clinical social workers, family counselors, blah, blah, blah. And I am a psychologist. I'm licensed by the North Carolina Psychology Board. You know, I've got all the bona fides. I don't believe in psychology. Why don't I believe in psychology? Because I know things about psychology that most people don't know. I know absolutely that psychology is a fake science. I know absolutely that the diagnoses that we dispense, regardless of whether we're dispensing them with respect to children or adults, are fake diagnoses. They're totally unscientific. They don't qualify as medical. Uh, and it's been a very, in that regard, there's been a very clever marketing campaign, I would call it, that has convinced the average American that these diagnoses have some scientific and medical validity when they have zero scientific, medical, and validity, none whatsoever. They are positioned as if they have scientific validity because the psychological community is in bed with big pharma, and they're helping big pharma sell drugs. And the therapies that we dispense, perform, are fake therapies. There is absolutely no scientific evidence whatsoever to the effect that these therapies are working on average. Of 100 people who go to see a psychologist, 6 months later, 33% of them say they got better, 33% say they got worse, 33% say they feel no different at all. So on average, psychological therapy accomplishes absolutely nothing. And when it does accomplish something, I maintain that it's simply because of the placebo effect. You go see a psychologist, you pay whatever, $150, $250 an hour, depending on where you are in the United States, and you feel like you're getting help, and so you start feeling better. Um, so a person my age, I referred to us earlier, and I said we comment to one another, and we make these comments to one another predominantly because what we've discovered is that young people, by and large, aren't interested in our point of view. And young people, by and large, there are exceptions to everything I say, but young people, by and large, aren't interested in our point of view, don't want to hear our point of view, and sometimes get very angry at us when we express our point of view concerning what we are seeing in their families, in their child rearing. And so we talk a lot to one another. And that's especially true with me because once people find out I'm a, quote, parenting expert, end quote, which simply means I've dedicated my life to the study of this rather odd phenomenon. It's odd these days. um, People start talking to me about it, and people start sharing their perceptions. And it's very interesting that almost everybody my age says the same thing. Everybody my age observes the same thing. Interesting story. I've told it before. You may have heard it. If you have, just tolerate the retelling. A few years ago, it was probably 10 years ago, a friend of mine in Roanoke, Virginia, called me up and told me that he wanted to persuade his pastor to bring me to their church. That their church, there were a lot of young families in the church. I think it's called a seeker church. And so I sent my friends some information, biography, various things. And about a week later, my friend calls me back and he says that his pastor has decided to pass on the opportunity to bring me to Roanoke, explaining that to my friend that he thinks, and this is 10 years ago, so I would have been about 65, that he felt that I was, quote, too old, end quote, to, you think that's funny. That hurts my feelings. I'm just kidding. She's too old to properly relate to the young people, the young parents in the congregation. And for a moment, I was not offended at all, not at all. I don't know I don't even know what 75 is supposed to feel like, but I certainly don't feel at the age of 75 like I thought I would feel. And my mind is, I think, better than ever. But the idea that I'm too old to properly relate to, communicate with, understand, empathize with, I guess all those things were implied by the pastor, just kind of caused me pause. And I thought, well, what is that all about? That I'm too old? And, I very quickly thought to myself, no, I'm not too old. I'm old enough. I'm old enough to have seen and experienced what I, in my life, needed to see and experience both as a child and an adult in order to have a proper grasp of what is going on in today's families that is causing people so much problems. What is going on? Well, what is going on that, for example, um, it's taking with some children over a year to get them to use the toilet properly. What is that all about? And I mean, this is not isolated. This is everywhere in America. People are complaining to me about, I can't get my child to use the toilet. And so, I mean, just for an example, I've talked to lots and lots. They're no longer with us for the most part, but lots and lots earlier on in my career of women who toilet trained children back in the late 40s, early 50s, and have asked them, was toilet training something difficult? Was it arduous? Did you struggle with it for months and maybe even more than a year? And they look at me and their sort of standard answer, if I was to boil all of their answers down to one answer, was no, John, it was just something you did. Just something you did. Now, I want you guys to ponder those words for a moment. Just something you did. See, it's no longer just something you do. Just taking this as an example. Toilet training is no longer just something you do. We now believe, and we have believed this for 50 years, that toilet training is fraught with these apocalyptic psychological ramifications, and that if not approached with precisely the right words and precisely the right body language and precisely the right tone of voice by the parent, that the child is going to have some sort of anxiety reaction or phobic reaction or defiant reaction or whatever kind of reaction, and that things are going to go downhill from there. And so today's parents, believing that this is what's happening, are approaching toilet training with a great deal of anxiety. And they're approaching it with dread. I mean, I've heard, mothers tell me, John, my child is 2. I'm about to start toilet training and I dread it. What is there to dread? I mean, I'm just using this as an example, ladies and gentlemen. What is there to dread? What is there to be anxious about? To use an apt comparison, teaching a child to use the toilet properly is no different, effectively, essentially, than teaching a child to hold a spoon in his or her hand, dip it into food, and bring it up to your mouth and eat it. No different. How is it no different? It is no different because A, they are both what's called self-help skills. B, the teaching of this involves the child making, at times, a god-awful mess with his food or with his elimination. And it requires some degree of structure, patience, and just the understanding that, yeah, this is something that is going to be a hassle for a few days, a couple of weeks, and then it's going to be over with. And so that is the way a woman, and let's face it, most toilet training is done by the female parent. The predominant energy is expended by the female parent. That's pretty much the way a woman approached it 75 years ago. Just very nonchalantly, it's time for you to start learning to use the toilet. You're not going to wear diapers anymore. I'm over changing diapers. What was the primary readiness sign when it came to toilet training? The primary readiness sign was the mother was ready to stop changing diapers. That was the readiness sign. It had nothing to do effectively with the child. And, some children were toilet trained when they were 12 months of age because the mother was ready to stop changing diapers when the child was 12 months of age. And some were not toilet trained until they were, closer to 2 years old. But almost all of them, and this is significant, were toilet trained prior to the second birthday, which is unheard of today almost, although I have persuaded, it would seem, a good number of parents to buck with uh, the contemporary wisdom on the subject and train their children 18, 20 months. But that just gives you one example. And so as a result of this very nonchalant, straightforward, this is what you're going to do attitude, the child was toilet trained, according to these older women, in 2 or 3 days. 2 or 3 days. And I maintain that that is how you raise a child. That is a paradigm for how you raise a child. You simply tell the child what to do because the child doesn't know what to do. So you tell the child what to do. You tell the child what to do if you're teaching him to feed himself. You tell the child what to do when you're teaching him to dress himself. You tell the child what to do and what not to do when you go into a public place, into a store, someone else's house. You tell children what to do. You're very straightforward. You're very brief because the more words you use, the fewer words the child hears. I'll say that again because it's a very important concept. The more words you use, the fewer words the child hears. And you just tell the child what to do. We're going into a store, Billy. Here's what you do and here's what you don't do in a store. And, we're going to someone's house. Here's what you do and here's what you don't do in someone's house. And you speak to children as if they are intelligent human beings, straightforwardly, directly, and with an economy of words. And for today's parents, for the benefit of today's parents, I would say, please, for your own good, stop ending sentences with the word okay, because you are not asking the child, you are telling. This is it's just a very simple understanding. It is a sign of the times that John Rosemond has made a career, and if I dare say so myself, successful from any point of view, a career out of telling people what women did not need to be told 75, 100, 175, 750, 7,000 years ago. It's very, very interesting, is it not? Because I'm not saying anything new. There are people out there that are saying new stuff. They feel some obligation to come up with new ideas, and I don't feel any obligation whatsoever to come up with new ideas. Because the old ways worked. They worked for all concerned. They worked for child, they worked for parents, they worked for grandparents, they worked for teachers, they worked for schools, they worked for communities. And human beings are never going to get it perfectly, but we can get it right. There is a difference. And we can get this right again. One parent, one family at a time. We can get this right. It is outrageous, just absolutely outrageous, that we have been listening to mental health professionals tell us how to raise children for 50 years, and the mental health of children is today, by conservative estimate, 10 times worse than it was when I was a kid. A factor that somebody explain that to me. If there's a psychologist out there in the audience, hello, where are you? Explain to me how it is that we've been listening to people in your and my profession tell us how to raise kids for 50 years. I was in graduate school in 1970 when it started, and over the last 50 years, there has been an exponential increase in counselors and therapists who specialize in talking to children. And over the last 50 years, despite this exponential increase in counselors and therapists who talk to children, child mental health has been in a state of free fall. This is outrageous. What it suggests very strongly is the mental health professions in America, when it comes to children, don't know what they are doing. They don't know what they're doing, and we need to stop listening to them. Well, John, you're a psychologist. Well, I am, but I'm really not. I don't believe in psychology. Like I told you before, fake science, fake diagnoses, fake therapies, fake everything. So yeah, I've got a license, and I guess legally I'm a psychologist, but I reject the implications of the title. um, People my age, we sit on the cusp of of this paradigm shift in child rearing that occurred in the late 60s and early 70s, because we are members of the last generation of American children to be raised the old way, and we are members of the first generation of American parents to begin raising their children the new way. And that was certainly true of my wife and myself. My wife is Willie. Her real name is Wilma. But when I met her and knew I was going to get married to her, I told her, I can't call you Wilma. I watched the Flintstones. I just can't do that. So she became Willie at that point, I.E. And Willie and I, that's what we did. I was in graduate school. I was being propagandized by my professors and the books I was reading that they were assigning to me. And I became convinced that the new way was the way to go. And without going into that, because I've gone into it many times in books, newspaper columns, public presentations, you'll be able to find it if you want to know the story. It was a disaster. I mean, it was an unmitigated disaster for my wife and I. And we were able to retrieve it, praise God. I do believe that it was part of God's plan for my life, that he put into our life a child who was so difficult to begin with, and the difficulties that he presented just by virtue of being who he was, this very strong-willed, insistent little person, were exacerbated by the fact that Willie and I were trying to raise him according to this new postmodern psychological formula that just didn't work. And it was, I mean, Amy said so earlier, our experiences with Eric are why I have been doing what I have been doing since 1975 or so. Anyway, it's very clear to people in my generation why today's parents are having the problems they're having. Problems that are unique historically. If you read descriptions of children written by people in the, say, 19th century, the 1800s, you don't read stories, real life stories. I'm not talking about Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn. That's fiction. I'm talking about real life stories. You don't read stories of children who are being defiant toward adults. There was virtually no such thing. You don't read stories of children throwing tantrums when they don't get their way. I mean, there was virtually no such thing. It's almost inconceivable to today's parents that there was a time in America not that long ago historically when children did what they were told and accepted the word no. It's almost inconceivable. And to today's parents, when I say that, they're, well, how did they do that? And my answer is they understood what their responsibilities were. They had a clear understanding of what they were doing. They had a clear understanding of why they had to do it and a clear understanding of the fact that children needed competent authority figures in their lives. Thank you, Dave. So, yeah. So, my wife just gave me a note, distracted me here. Um, yeah, the problems that we've been dealing with concerning children for the last, since we embraced this new psychological paradigm, are unique historically. Defiance, full-blown tantrums, well beyond toddlerhood, and teenagers acting as if all of life is a soap opera and that a life without soap opera is a life without meaning. And the explanation is simply this: you can't raise children in two entirely different ways and arrive at the same outcome. You cannot raise children in two entirely different ways and arrive at the same outcome. And that brings up the issue of, well, what are the differences between pre-1970 child rearing and post-1970 parenting? And they are very, very different. First of all, pre-1970, it was merely child rearing. And now we have this thing, and we have had this thing since 1970, this thing called parenting. And the differences are, the salient, essential differences are that A, the family is now child-centered. It was understood when I was a child that it was my job to pay attention to my parents. And today's parents believe that it's their job to pay attention to their children. And the implications, the consequences of that are extremely significant. The consequences of that are that the child does not learn to pay attention to his parents. Because children don't learn two opposite things simultaneously. They learn either one or the other. They learn either that it's their job to pay attention to their parents, or they learn that it is their parents' job to pay attention to them. And I would say that in 95% of today's families, it's very clear to children that their parents believe it is their responsibility to pay attention to them. And when your child believes that it's your job, and of course he can't express that, it's an intuitive understanding. When the child believes that it's your job to pay attention to him, then you are going to experience discipline problems with the child. Because successful discipline The prerequisite to successful discipline is the child is paying attention to you. If the child is paying attention to you, discipline is going to be a relatively simple matter. If the child is not paying attention to you because he believes it's your job to pay attention to him, then discipline is going to be a difficult matter. That's where, that right there is where the snowball begins to roll downhill. In the 1950s and before, people were raising children as husband and wife. Today, people are raising children as mom and dad. And that's why they're not on the same page. Because paradoxically and counterintuitively, it's very difficult to get on the same page if the primary roles that you occupy are the roles of mom and dad. And I ask people, I say, well, you know, how much time during the week, percentage-wise, give me a percentage. How much time during the week are you functioning in the role of husband, or are you functioning in the role of wife? And people will think about that for a minute, and the average answer is, well, John, probably about 5 to 10%, which, unbeknownst to them, explains a tremendous amount. It explains why the #1 complaint that I receive from parents is, my husband and I, my wife and I, are not on the same page. You get on the same page as husband and wife. You do not get on the same page as mom and dad. And I could go into that for a whole nother webinar. I'm not going to. Just trust me, that's the way it is. In the 1950s, it was very, very obvious to the child that the relationship between his parents trumped either of their relationships with him. And I don't think that's the case in the American family today. I think the child thinks that his parents are more interested in a relationship with him than they are one another. And that is contributing tremendously to the problems that parents are having with their kids. So some of you may be asking, well, John, let's get on topic here. Well, I am on topic. You know, why is there no humor in American parenting today? Folks, there's no humor in American parenting today because we're doing things collectively as a culture so wrong when it comes to the raising of kids that there's nothing to laugh about. Whereas there was all kinds of stuff to laugh about back in the 1950s. All kinds of stuff. Your parents gave you things to laugh about when you grew up. Let me give you an example. I was arrested when I was 17 years old. I won't go into a long story, but I was arrested and for disturbing the peace. And I was one of a bunch of guys who were hauled into the police station. Our parents were called, and I was one of several kids whose parents didn't come get them. Can you imagine this? Okay, there was like about 7 of us, and 4 parents came to get 4 kids, and 3 parents, no, they told the police, we'll keep them for a couple of days. I mean, see, all of you are laughing. I mean, it's hilarious. It's hilarious. But can you imagine a parent doing this today? I can't imagine it. I just can't imagine it, you know? Here's another funny story. I was out riding my bicycle. I was probably 10 years old with some friends of mine, and we were doing what boys do when they ride bikes. They all try and get in the lead. And so we were jockeying for the lead, and I was a very good athlete, and I was in the lead. And so there's about 6 of us riding bikes in a pack, and I'm out front by about 20 feet. And I come up to a corner, and we're in a small business district in the suburbs of Chicago. And we come up to this corner, and as I turn the corner, because the rule was that the kid in the lead could decide where to go when you came to a turn, okay? So I decided to go right. And as I turn to my right, I look back to see where everyone else is, and I smack into the back end of a parked car. And I'm going as fast as I can on my bike. And I smack in, as I'm looking backwards, smack into the back end of a parked car, a totally immovable object. I fly over my handlebars. I am sprawled out on the trunk of the car. My bike is ruined. The front wheel is bent beyond description. I'm all bruised and battered. I get up, I walk home. When I come in, my mother says, "What in the world happened to you?" I tell her. And my mother sits down and begins laughing so hard she can't get her breath. And when you think about it, it was hilarious. It was hilarious. It was like something out of a slapstick movie. And, my mother made sure that I was okay. And I think part of her laughter was that she was just so relieved that I was okay. But can you imagine a parent doing this today? And when she started laughing, I started laughing too. And so we were both just standing there. She was sitting down because she couldn't stand up. And I'm standing there, and we're both just laughing hysterically at the fact that this sort of slapstick thing occurred. But my point partly is that you have to have a relaxed attitude toward children and a relaxed attitude toward raising children in order to see the humor in things. And it's very unfortunate to me that it would appear that today's parents just take everything with maximum seriousness, everything under the sun. Not to say that some things don't merit maximum seriousness, but I dare say not everything merits the seriousness that so many of today's parents give to things. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I've got this list of things that I believe parents should start saying to their children. Here it is. And I'm not going to go through this whole list, okay? But the first one is, and before I tell you any of these, again, I'm a guy who speaks very straightforwardly to children. I believe in speaking very straightforwardly to kids. I believe in using an economy of words, speaking very straightforwardly, and I believe in letting children know that in the relationship, you are the superior being. You are the superior being, and that everything will be better for them if they recognize your superiority in the relationship. So the first one that I wrote down is, and again, it's just an example of being straightforward with children and telling children the truth. You're very ungrateful, You obviously think your life stinks when in fact, on your worst day, you live a better life than 80% of the world's children. That's not how parents today talk to their kids. But I sort of, I didn't really make this up. I mean, my parents probably said words to this effect to me.
You
I
said them to
probably,
me.
I was just going to say, I know I've said words to that effect to Amy when she was,
Oh, yeah.
Amy doesn't look her age either. Let me repeat it. You're very ungrateful. You obviously think your life stinks, when in fact, on your worst day, you, child, you live a better life than 80% of the world's children. Now, see, that is a great thing for kids to hear. It's just a great thing for kids to hear. Because For one thing, children over dramatize everything that happens to them, virtually everything. The Bible even references this, if you want to look it up, Proverbs 22:15, where it says, foolishness is bound in the heart of the child. What a brilliant remark. Foolishness, this propensity for self-drama, is bound in the heart of the child. And what I see is too many parents today almost catering to the drama, treating the drama as if it should be taken seriously. When I believe we have an obligation to put things into proper perspective for children. And so when they get dramatic, here's another one of the 12. Well, you know what? You're making a mountain out of a molehill here. I have adult responsibilities, and I do not intend to stand here and listen to foolishness of this sort. When's the last time you heard a parent today talk like that to a child? You haven't. And that's part of the problem. My mother used to say to me, you, John Rosemond, are making a mountain out of a molehill. I have things to do, and I am not going to stand here and listen to this foolishness. I mean, almost every one of these 12 things that I've got written down on this piece of paper, my mother was a single parent for most of the first 7 years of my life. I can attribute almost all of these to my mother. And all they are is simply reality talk, is what it is. It's reality talk. How about this one? N-O-E spells no. Some of you look puzzled. I told you, you got to put some humor into this. N-O-E spells no. Say that to your child. N-O-E spells no. No, it doesn't, Mom. Yeah, it does. It does for now. Did you turn around and walk away? You know, see, you're laughing. Put humor back into this whole thing. And of course, there is the time-honored because I said so. Because I said so. Why? Because I said so. That's not a reason. That's all I can think of right now. I'm not very smart. Do not engage with a child. Write that down. Do not engage with a child. The moment you engage with a child, you have lost. To engage with a child, you lower yourself to the child's level. And therefore you've lost. You've lost a grip on your authority. And children, they don't always like it, which is not the issue, but children need steady authority. And I believe that the more confidence you feel in your authority, the funnier a parent you will be. Ain't that right, Amy?
There's a lot of humor when in our family when I was being raised. People think that because he's my father that he was so strict and like, you know, this military dad, but we laughed a lot. So you can have that authority with your children and still have fun with your family, and your children will still respect you and, you know, have wonderful childhood memories like I did.
Yeah, I pay Amy to say these sorts of things, by the way. She's on the payroll. But yeah, authority. Let's talk about that for a minute. Authority is not some rigid, hard unyielding thing. Authority is a very relaxed. There's no reason for it to be anything other than relaxed, because if you possess a complete sense of confidence in the legitimacy of your authority over a child, there is no reason for you to be uptight and tense. Just relax. NOE spells no. Be funny. Here's another one. Sweetheart, you are free to disagree with me, but you are not free to disobey me. So you go right ahead and disagree all you want. You are free to disagree with me. I believe children, should have the right, basically, with certain caveats, freedom of speech. I'm not talking about freedom of inappropriate speech, but freedom to express themselves in a civilized fashion. It's up to you to teach your children how to express themselves in a civilized fashion. But children, it should be clear. Yeah, you can disagree, but you can't disobey. I mean, I know you will, because you're a child, and you will push the limits, and you will try and get away with things without, when you think I'm not going to find out. But when you disobey, 99% of the time, I'm going to find out, and you're going to lose your freedom. So you're free to disagree, but you're not free to disobey. I'm going to send these to you by email. Amy will. It's amy@rosemond.com. When you see that email come in, this will be in the email.
I'll put my email in the chat so that you'll recognize it.
Okay. Here's another one. You hate me, do you? I mean, parents today, excuse me, they get bent out of shape, rattled when their children tell them they hate them. Who cares? Who cares that a child hates you for a moment? It's irrelevant. It's just nothing more than a reflection of the child's lack of emotional control. So you hate me, do you? Well, come to think of it, if I was you right now, I'd hate me too. See, and that takes the wind totally out of the sail. Oh, you hate me, do you? Well, let me tell you, if I was you right now, I'd hate me too. How about that? It takes the wind totally out of the sail. It defuses the whole situation. Okay, questions?
I was just going to comment that I think I told you I hate you I don't know how many times. And I don't hate you. I'm sorry I ever said that. It's not true. It's just that, he's right. You say it and your kid says it in the moment and they truly feel that, but it is a passing emotion that, it goes away as quickly as it came on.
To be honest, Amy wouldn't say, I hate you. Amy would, it was this primal, prehistoric scream. I hate you. Oh.
That was very dramatic.
Yes. It all comes out in the wash, as they say.
Mm-hmm. To listen the first time.
Yeah, we'll ask a quick question just about getting, and I have a feeling this will end up circling back to the authority topic that we talked about already, and maybe a few others, but just getting kids to listen the first time that you give a demand or give direction. Any suggestions on that front?
Well, if you repeat yourself, then you will find yourself having to repeat yourself. Now, that sounds very simplistic, but it's actually extremely wise. If you repeat yourself, you will end up repeating yourself. So my rule is you tell them once. Well, John, we tell them once and nothing happens. Well, if nothing happens, that's the problem. but you tell them once. You know, if you tell them twice, Robin and Ava, then they will wait until you tell them twice before they comply, obey, cooperate, whatever word you want to use. And if they learn that if they stand there and act stupid or act like they didn't hear you, and you will repeat yourself a third time, then you will have to continue repeating yourself 3 times. So you tell them once. Well, John, if I tell them once and nothing happens, what do I do then? Well, then you use consequences. But here is a way, I believe this, guys. I believe that parents should do everything they can to minimize the use of consequences. Today's parents rely excessively on consequences. And the fact of the matter is that you can use consequences to a point where they become virtually meaningless. And so you should do all that you can to minimize your use of consequences. So if you want to take notes on this, here is a 6-part formula for giving children instructions. Are you ready? Pen, paper, pencil, typewriter. Number 1, and this is exactly the opposite of what the mental health professional powers that be are going to tell you. Number 1, when you talk to a child, do not get down to the child's level. Do not do that. Do not lower yourself in front of a child. I can't begin to tell you how wrong that is. Number 2, when giving instructions to a child, use the fewest words possible. And usually you can give an instruction in 5 words or less. Put on your jacket. Get in the car. And that may sound blunt to the point of even being kind of rude. So number 3, preface the fewest words possible with authoritative phrases such as, it's time for you to get in the car. I want you to pick up these toys. You are now going to put your coat on. But just remember, the fundamental instruction should be conveyable in 3 to 5 words. Pick up your toys. It's now time for you to pick up your toys. 10 words. Number 4, do not explain yourself. Don't do this. We need to leave the house, so it's time for you to pick up your toys. Don't do this. It's cold outside, so I want you to put on your coat. Don't do that sort of thing. Do not give explanations for your instructions. Pastor Williamson is coming over. I want to meet with him in this room. I want to serve him coffee and pastries. You need to pick up these toys so that he won't trip over any. See, that's the way today's parents talk. They turn something that could be 10 words into 50 words, and they give an explanation. When you explain yourself to a child, it is virtually inevitable that the child will try to engage you in an argument. And the child is always, without exception, using the explanation to create the argument. Pastor Williamson is coming over, and I'm going to serve him coffee and pastries in this room. And it's very important that the floor have no toys on it so that he doesn't trip over anything or step on something. Okay, now listen to the argument. You don't have to eat in here. Why are you letting Pastor Williamson eat in here? Pastor Williamson should have to follow the same instructions, same rules I follow. Sounds like somebody's throwing plates or something. It's cold outside. I want you to put your jacket on. It's not that cold. The argument is constructed out of the explanation. It is not constructed out of the instruction. This is very important to understand. We're almost late. It's time for you to get in the car. Hurry up. We're going to make it. Why are you always in such a hurry? Which is why, again, you should just simply say the instruction. It's time for you to put on your coat. Why? Okay, this is number 5. When you don't give an explanation, the child is going to ask for one. Because children are drawn like magnets to argument. When a child asks for an explanation, why or why not, your answer should be one of two things, either because I said so, or why is a crooked letter. You've never heard that one before, have you? I mean, mix them up. Why? Why is a crooked letter? What does that mean? I have no idea. Be a mystery. Be a mystery. Okay, so do not get down to the child's level. Express the instruction in 5 words or less. Preface it with authoritative phrases like, it's time for you to, you're now going to. Number 4, don't give explanations. Number 5, when an explanation is requested from the child, either because I said so or why is a crooked letter. And number 6, walk away. Now, there will be times when you cannot walk away. If you can't walk away, then you can't walk away. It's just the way it is. But if you can walk away, just walk away. Just walk away. I call it pulling the plug on the power struggle. Walk away. Now, you come back into the room in 5 minutes and the toys aren't picked up. What do you do then? What do I do then, John? Now you go to consequences. When you go to consequences, several rules apply. Rule number 1, take a deep breath. See, today's parents, here's what they're doing. Billy, you didn't pick up these toys. You're not going to the movies tonight. Well, what are you going to do with them when you go to the movies? What, now because he didn't pick up his toys, you're going to spend 20 bucks on a babysitter? That makes no sense. Take a deep breath. You don't have to, contrary to what the psychological powers that be have told you, you don't have to deliver a consequence immediately upon the commission of a misbehavior. Now, you do with 2-year-olds. Yeah. You do with 2-year-olds, because 2-year-olds have no long-term memory. A 2-year-old doesn't remember what happened 10 minutes ago. But by the time a child is 3 years old, children possess long-term memory. There's the very complicated academic, scientific, research-based explanation for this. Don't worry about it. Just trust me. By the time a child is 3 years old, you can begin delaying consequences. 3-year-old, you can delay until bedtime. 4, 5, and 6, several days. 7, 8, 9, week. And all you have to do is just say, this is what is happening now because of what happened 3 days ago. And you describe what happened 3 days ago to a 7-year-old, and the 7-year-old, upon being given the description, remembers. And the connection is made. Now, teenagers, months. Husbands, years. Husbands know that. The second rule of consequences is, this is the first rule, so you want to put it number one. Tell them once, do not repeat yourself. This is how you get children to listen to you. You give the instruction one time. You give the instruction a reasonable time to be carried out. If it is not carried out, then either ignore that it hasn't been carried out until the opportunity for a consequence presents itself, or if it has to be done, do it yourself. And then 2 days later, can I go over to Billy's house? Oh, gosh. I hate this. What, Mom? I hate it that you can't go to Billy's house. Why can't I go to Billy's house? Oh, because I told you 2 days ago to pick up the toys in the living room because I told you to pick them up. You didn't pick them up, so I picked them up. And because I picked them up, you can't go to Billy's. You know, and whack, that gets through. And the next
You did that
time,
to me when I was a teenager. You did that to me with Angie.
yeah.
And I don't think I ever did what I did to deserve that again. But I still remember where this exchange took place. Like it will definitely.
Yeah, it creates a permanent memory.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes, yes. I remember that incident very clearly.
I think you wrote about it in one of your books.
I believe so.
Yeah. Christina has a question when you are ready for questions again.
Okay.
No, I think you answered it.
Hold on just a second, Christina. And rule number 3 is the punishment should never fit the crime. If the crime is hypothetically this big, the consequence ought to be this big, huge, because the purpose of a consequence is to create a permanent memory. So make it outrageous. Okay, Christina, you got a question?
I think you answered it. It was more like if they didn't do it, then you do it for them, but then eventually you use it later and to give them the consequence. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, like this. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that I'm going to have to say, no, you can't go with your friends to the shopping center. Why not? Because 3 days ago, you called me a jerk. And jerks don't let their children go to the shopping center with their friends.
Sure.
And you turn around and you walk away. When you start getting used to this, it's, you know, the title of this webinar was, you know, not only to make parenting easier, but to make it a little more humorous. When you start getting used to this, believe me, you will begin thinking this way. And it'll become easier and easier and easier. And believe me, again, you'll have a lot of fun with this.
Yeah. It's just hard sometimes because you put your emotions in it and you get so angry that they're like misbehaving so much. And so we're the ones who lose there, the fight, because we're stooping down to their level.
Yeah, usually you're getting angry because you're repeating yourself.
Mm-hmm. True.
You know, Christina, anything. I mean, you play golf?
No.
No? I thought everybody in Miami played golf. Man, that's all I'd be doing if I was in Miami. Anyway, you know, if you want to correct something about your golf swing, you got to get out on the practice tee. You got to practice it over and over and over again. It's the same here. If you want to correct something about your parenting, you have to set your mind to it. You have to concentrate until it becomes a habit.
There's also learning that self-control as a parent, and what you said before, take a deep breath. That's very important because we can get overwhelmed with the kids just not listening to us, you know, and we are repeating ourselves, but learning to take that breath. My father has the most self-control of anybody I've ever known. He was like just even keeled when I was a kid. Like, I don't remember you ever raising your voice. I mean, you were just matter of fact about things. And if we can have that self-control, take that breath, that's one of the hardest things for me when my kids were younger, was just maintaining that level, you know, even keeled manner that you always had, which worked.
Yeah. And it doesn't come naturally to most people. I don't think it came naturally to me. What comes naturally to most people is reacting. And the minute you react to something your child has done at a knee-jerk level, you're allowing the child to control the emotional climate in the room. And the minute that happens, there is no adult in the room. There is no adult. And all of this, I mean, the good news, folks, is you say, well, gosh, John, I wish I was like that. Well, you can be like that. All you have to do is, it's like you too can correct your slice on the golf course. And all you have to do is just put your mind to it and practice new habits. They're in your hands, they're in your swing, they're in your tempo. And the same thing is true in your home. You just have to set your mind to these things. What I'm giving you in these webinars is I'm giving you, the same advice that a golf professional would be giving you if you were seeking advice concerning your golf swing. I'm just giving you the instructions, but it's up to you to put it to practice to the point where it becomes a habit.
Hi, John. This is Shelley and Gordon from Michigan. Would like just to hear a repeat of the bedtime routine speech, if you would be so kind.
The bedtime routine speech, Shelley. The bedtime routine speech. I'm blanking here. It's COVID brain, probably. Help me out.
Okay, 8 years old and 11 years old, both boys. Just fly by the seat of your pants. Give us whatever you want to give us. We'll write it down.
Something concerning bedtime?
Yes.
She's asking you for, an ideal bedtime routine for kids 7 and 8 years old, boys, to kind of restore peace to the household and get them to bed at an appropriate time.
And what that
Well,
time might be.
advice number one is that I insist upon children being in their rooms at least an hour before bedtime. I don't think you should let children dominate the evening in a household. I think they should be clear. You have a room, and after dinner, here is your routine. You take a bath, you get your pajamas on, and then you are allowed to stay up until whatever hour is reasonable from your point of view and given the circumstances of your situation. So say you're allowed to stay up until 8:30, but you have to be in your room. And if you come out of your room and attract attention to yourself, then you're going to bed immediately.
What I did with my own kids was something along those lines. But it was 30 minutes before their bedtime or more. The older they got, it got longer because they were reading on their own, so they would stay up reading a little longer. But we always did brush your teeth, take a bath or a shower, and get your pajamas on, get tucked into bed. And when they were younger, we would read to them, and maybe one or two stories, sing a little song, turn out the light. When they were older, they were allowed to stay up and read their own books and turn off we didn't say a time, we just wanted their lights off at an appropriate time, and they did. They got tired and turned their lights off eventually. And that seemed to work for us. But just continuing that routine until they're older, and even when they were in high school, they were staying up later, but they were still staying in their room, lights out at a reasonable hour. So.
And may I say, please do not put your children in their rooms with devices.
No, we always took their phones and they were plugged in to charge overnight in our bedroom. Yeah.
Of course, if I had children today, my children would be the most pitiful children in the neighborhood.
We would be.
They would be.
You got a Nintendo, souped up Nintendo system shipped to you in the 80s and it went into the attic. We couldn't even play it.
Yeah,
I think we snuck it out once when you guys went out of town, and then we tried to get it back in the box perfectly as if you would check.
Yeah, I wrote an article about how video games are addictive. By the way, to toot my own horn, yes, I am. I was the first person in America to say video games are addictive. And I said it before the research had been done. And yep, the research now indicates they are literally addictive. They create changes in the brain. And the younger the brain, the more vulnerable the brain is to the addiction. Mm-hmm. So if my kids were growing up today, my kids would be the most pitiful children in the state of North Carolina because they would have 0 devices.
Well, actually, it might be a relief with social media and these kids. It would be a relief not to have to conform to those standards.
All right, guys.
See what your friends are doing that you're not doing and all that. But
I don't care what questions you ask. You can ask any questions you want. You don't have to ask questions along the topic of the webinar. Everything relates anyway. It's all tied together in the final analysis. Where are you from, Jaron?
Hi, I'm from Arkansas. We've had a couple one-on-one sessions, me and my husband with you.
Oh, I thought your name sounded familiar. Yeah, where in Arkansas?
We're in Northwest Arkansas, so like Rogers, Bentonville area.
Oh, okay. I just talked to somebody in Rogers the other day.
Yeah, it's also with the whole cell phone thing. I'm a middle school counselor, and it's horrific. It's horrific.
Is the word, yeah.
The things that I see. So my kids will be pitiful as well.
Good for you. Yeah, I spoke with a pastor in Cabot, which is down in the Little Rock area yesterday. Apparently interested in having me come to Cabot to do a couple of talks. You're up in the Walmart area.
Yes, pretty much everybody here works for Walmart.
Oh, yeah. That was amazing to me to drive into that part of the country for the first time. And it's like Walmart drugs, Walmart gas, Walmart cleaners, Walmart, everything's Walmart.
Yeah.
So you're a middle school counselor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're 10 and 11.
What are the big problems that you're seeing?
Yeah, that's hard for me because I'm a mental health professional too, and it's kind of like all a crock. Like, it's hard for me because I live in both worlds, and definitely social media, all of that. They're very depressed. They are staying up on their phones unsupervised in their rooms all hours of the night. It creates lots of problems. Just socially, they're exposed to so many things that they are not ready to be exposed to. I would say, yeah, just depression, just anxiety. And again, that comes from just that crippling of parents try to fix everything for them. If there's an issue at school, the parents always attack the teacher instead of holding their child to task. And so the children don't know how to handle anything because they don't have to handle anything. So they have a lot of anxiety, they have a lot of depression, and the phones are a humongous problem. And they are on all sorts of medications that it's very terrifying to me. So I
Yeah.
would say those are the biggest
Most
things.
people don't know these medications are fake medications too. That no psychiatric medication, this is a fact. And I challenge anyone in the psychiatric, pharmaceutical, psychological industry to debate me on this. Not one psychiatric drug has ever reliably outperformed a placebo in double-blind clinical trials, which is why the FDA vets a psychiatric drug using an entirely different set of standards than the standards they would use to vet a drug designed to deal with a verifiable physiological disorder. It is a scandal waiting to happen. And we're giving these drugs to children.
And a lot of these drugs cause worse problems than what they're prescribed to fix.
Well, in effect, these drugs are placebos. They don't outperform placebos reliably. Therefore, they are placebos with two very significant differences. A, they are expensive, and B, they have potentially dangerous and unpredictable side effects. The side effects are called idiosyncratic because you never know how a person is going to react until you give it to them. It is just what we are doing to America's children with social media, screen-based devices, and these fake diagnoses and these fake medications. It's just unbelievable. But that is the subject of another webinar. But thank you, Jaron.
I guess I could have a question.
Say what?
I guess I could think of a question that just popped up recently. When you do have company over, there's been a couple of times recently with us that like our children are, my youngest is kind of, he just goes off on his own, but my oldest does like very attention seeking behavior, as if the guest coming over is there for them instead of for the adult. And so we've done several things like, don't interrupt when adults are speaking, or you can go to your room until we're finished. And that works once. And then the second time they went in their room and just like screamed. So that was still kind of distracting because they were having a tantrum in their room, which they were in their room behind closed doors. Because we kind of follow this is your tantrum spot. You can't have one out here. You have to go in your room. But it was still just kind of distracting because of that. So I didn't really know where to go from there because we were kind of following the advice of, stop interrupting. And then they didn't. So as you can go in your room if you're going to be, have a tantrum or whatever. And so they did. But then they were in their room, screaming, having a tantrum, and then it was still distracting, even though they were in their room behind closed doors. And I didn't really know what the next step would be after that.
How old are the boys, Sharon?
My youngest is 3, and my oldest is 5. They just turned 3 and 5.
Yeah. Well, yeah, first of all, I would be proactive. This stuff is going to happen. And so what I would do, and Eric was the same way, Amy's older brother, when people would come over, your description, he thought they were there to see him and talk to him. And it was quite annoying and embarrassing at the same time. And so what we just started doing was I sat down with Eric one day and I said, from now on, when guests come over, before they come over, you go to your room. And you have to stay in your room until they leave. And we never dealt with tantrums and screaming. What we dealt with was Eric coming downstairs, even though he'd been told to be in his room. And so what I eventually had to do was to tell him that if you are put in your room and you come downstairs while we have a guest, then there will be this consequence on the weekend. Usually you'll be grounded, you'll go to bed early, something like that. There are children who, I think this is a fact. There are children who you describe a consequence and that'll take care of the problem. And there are children who you use a consequence level 3 and that'll take care of the problem. And there are children who, to take care of the problem, you have to use a consequence level 10 times before they get it. And, it's just the way it is.
Okay.
You said you're a mental health professional. What is your title?
I have a master's in counseling, a bachelor's and a master's, and a school license.
Got it. Okay, folks. So if there aren't any more questions.
I have one more question, Dr. Rosemond.
Can
you elaborate on your Bill of Rights? Or just your thinking behind that? If you can just give me 30 seconds on that. The Bill of Rights. You have 10 Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
Just your reasoning behind it, because I want to use it, in the school setting.
Yeah. The reason I wrote that is because a group, a very well-intentioned group, they're called EPIC, End Physical Punishment of Children. It was an acronym for that. They came up with this Bill of Rights for children. And it was this very progressive, politically correct Bill of Rights. And I decided when I saw it for the first time, and I saw it for the first time back in the late 70s, early 80s, that I would write a counter Bill of Rights. And so, to be very honest with you, Rhonda, I haven't seen it in a while, but it read something like this. Every child has a right to have a routine of chores around the house on a daily basis.
It used to be a poster. It used to be a poster that we sold.
Yeah.
I can try and find the image and send it to people.
Yeah,
because it was really powerful.
I think you think to revise it and bring it sort of up to date.
Yeah.
Every child's right not to have a life that's full of screen-based devices, So yeah, we should look for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Rhonda.
Dr. Rosemond, could you speak to the appropriate wrestling type behavior with boys? Hey, if you guys want to expend that kind of energy, you can do that outside, but not in the living room. Or at what point do you shut it down completely? Just need a little help in that.
Oh, you shut it down completely whenever you feel like it.
That's what I was trying to tell my husband, but anyway.
And you don't have to shut it down at the same point every day. I think children should get used to the fact that your mood, to some degree, influences the decisions that you make. So today, you guys can wrestle in the living room. Tomorrow, you can't. Why? We did yesterday. Yeah, yesterday I was not in a bad mood. I'm in a bad mood right now, and I'm dangerous. If you wrestle in the living room today, I could do something really ugly, and I don't want to do that. So
Love the humor. Thanks.
children get used to a sense of humor very quickly. Some people say, well, John, you're being sarcastic. And I suppose there is an element of sarcasm, but it's not sarcasm that's critical of the child.
John, just to give you a little props, I had a brand new client this past week. Well, I suggested the mom come because she wanted me to see her 6-year-old daughter who was having tantrums. Well, as a form of informed consent, I shared some of the principles that you have taught and that I would like, one of the parents to always be with the child during a session so that we could be working on consistency of what I might be teaching and what they could carry on at home so it would be consistent. Long story short, after that first session, she emailed me that she'd done some research and some discussion and reconsidered and that they're going to go find a play therapist for their daughter. And I said, no problem. I wish you well.
Yeah, well, what do you do in a case like that?
Well, I just took it as a compliment because it actually saved me from having a difficult set of clients, meaning the parents that weren't going to support anything I was going to perhaps teach the kid.
Yeah, well, Shelley, when I was in private practice, and I still do a certain amount of consultations, but I'm really not doing therapy. You get these people every once in a while who think that you should and are able to fix the kid, that you have magic words that you learned in graduate school or something like that. It's just this idea. And I would say to the parents, well, I don't need to meet with your child. I don't need to meet with a 5-year-old. The 5-year-old is not able to rationally manage his own life. And I would get parents who would get very defensive about that, Shelley. Well, are you blaming us for the problem? And you're not going to get anywhere with people like that anyway. I don't understand. I tell people all the time, there really are no practice standards in psychology. If there were practice standards, people wouldn't be allowed to do play therapy. People wouldn't be allowed to do pretty much any therapy because no therapy has ever, the efficacy of 0 therapies has been demonstrated consistently by research. And so, what I think works? I think what works is telling people what to do. Which when people come to me, that's what I do. I don't get into feelings. I don't do therapy. Therapy is about how do you feel about that? I don't do that. I just tell people what to do. Here's what I think you ought to do. Concerning matters of child behavior, that seems to be the most effective approach. But there are people out there in the world who they want a diagnosis.
I think that's exactly what the mom was after, and I wasn't about to give a 6-year-old a diagnosis. So, yeah, it gets tricky, especially in the school system.
Well, especially in the school system, yeah, it goes without saying. I said the mental health professions in America are in bed with big pharma, and so are America's schools, and that is not limited to public.
I would wholeheartedly agree, John.
I would say it was worse for the private schools.
Mm.
When Holden was in private school, the push for medication was a lot stronger than in the public school.
Yeah, I've had private school heads tell me that the parents of private school students are the worst when it comes to wanting children on medication. All right, guys. Well,
Christina has a question, Dad.
What's that?
You see the little hand waving on her screen? That means she has a question.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, it's actually two. They're not related, but I just thought, they came up
Lean
while we
into
were
the
talking about.
microphone. I can't hear you, sweetheart.
Oh, you can't hear me. Can you hear me better now?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. I had two different questions. One, I have, two daughters, and I am an only child, so the sibling rivalry thing is something that I don't understand very well, and it's hard for me to see, like, how much do I control or how much do I let go, because it's normal or not, because I never experienced that. And then the second question, which is nothing related with that, was like, what do you think it's nowadays that we're doing as parents? Because, like, you're a younger generation that it has gotten out of hand, like the total authority. Like now the kids are more like the ones telling us what to do. Like what is it that got us there? Like I'm just curious about that. Like what happened there?
That's an
That's a
interesting
very
question.
deep question though.
All right, I'll take them in order. First of all, the rule of thumb concerning sibling rivalry is hold both children equally accountable. And I've written an entire chapter on dealing with sibling conflict in a book of mine titled The Well-Behaved Child. The Well-Behaved Child, Discipline That Really Works.
Okay.
So what you can do is go to my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and order that book.
The well-behaved child, yeah.
Whole
Okay.
chapter in there. As far as how did we get here, we got here because in the late 60s and early 70s, when I was in graduate school, the mental health professions in America began agitating for America to embrace what is effectively a socialist model of child rearing, where theoretically the parent and the child are equals. If you went back to the writing that was being done on parenting in the late 60s and early 70s, the two most influential books, Parent Effectiveness Training by California psychologist Thomas Gordon, Your Child's Self-Esteem by California family counselor Dorothy Briggs, the two most influential books of the time were both advocating for the democratic family, a family in which children were included in all decision making from around age 2. And the snowball rolled downhill from there. And this whole business of getting down to your child's level, it's a symptom of socialist parenting. The message embedded in the parent getting down to the child's level is, we are really equals here. In effect, what most people don't know, most young people don't know, is that one of the major themes of the 1960s was the demonization of all forms of traditional authority, including parental authority. Thomas Gordon, Dorothy Briggs both portrayed the traditional exercise of parent authority as psychologically damaging to children, when in fact we now know that exactly the opposite is the case. Okay, guys, I've enjoyed being with you, and look for our next webinar, which will be coming up either in late April or early May.
We're gonna do it once a month, so it'll be in April, late April.
Later.
Yeah,
Amy's
and I will
the
send the recording out to everyone once it is finished processing, probably tomorrow morning. I'll send the copy of the Bill of Rights to you guys, and also a coupon code so you can get 25% off any book in the bookstore at GaryGuru.com. So look for that either this evening or tomorrow morning.
all
Thank
right,
you.
I'm stopping the recording at this point. Good being with you all. Have a great evening, guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.